Denver's so fed up with dispensaries getting robbed, it's fining them for poor security, even if they don't get hit.
It makes people a lot less likely to do a smash and grab when there's nothing to grab after they smash.
Colorado Springs fights misinformation that it's seeing mass migrant arrivals from Denver, says it's wasting tax dollars chasing down these false claims. Democrats call on the oil and gas industry to take summers off, improve the air for everyone, and the state may look at a plan to cut down on how much people drive. And the plan to fix Denver's MLK statue as investigators try to figure out if the vandal was motivated by hate or the cash from scrap metal. That's tonight on Next. Dispensaries are full of stuff people love to steal: cash and marijuana. It's why Denver has a law requiring cannabis businesses to have more security measures than other businesses do. Our Evan Krugel found that not following the rules is costing businesses thousands of dollars, even if they never get robbed.
It is a crime of opportunity. A recent smash and grab at a Denver dispensary. But these thieves didn't get away with much because this pot shop locks up its stash every night.
Businesses that are selling marijuana or have marijuana, they have to store it overnight in a safe. And that includes the edibles, the product, and it also includes the cash.
Eric Escudero says the city made that change in 2022 after a string of dispensary burglaries.
It makes people a lot less likely to do a smash and grab when there's nothing to grab after they smash.
But Escudero says not everyone is playing along.
Yeah, unfortunately, we haven't had 100% compliance like we hoped from the marijuana industry with these new rules for safe storage, which actually protects them from losing their product.
That includes this McKenna dispensary on South Broadway, which was burglarized last year. Records show 6 days later, the city showed up for an inspection and found the dispensary was not using a safe after hours.
There has been a few businesses that the city has unfortunately had to take enforcement action against after repeatedly warning them, trying to get them in compliance, and unfortunately we had to get to a place where there was a need for enforcement.
2 other dispensaries are now being ordered to pay a combined $20,000 in fines. McKenna's case is still pending, but Escudero says 2 years into the new rule, it's time for businesses to get on board.
And so the last thing we want to do is shut down a business and have people lose their jobs. What we're trying to get is compliance.
Now, we did stop by McKenna today. A store manager told me she was not aware of any of these violations and passed along the general manager's number, who so far has not responded. Kyle.
So I feel like Denver's entire story these days is the way that federal rules impact the city. So obviously, under federal rules, it's difficult for these dispensaries to be able to bank. So that's why they often have lots of cash. So Denver has to come in and deal with the situation where people know they got fat stacks of cash in there.
And those storage systems are certainly not cheap. So you've got this situation where they're having to pay tens of thousands of dollars to create a situation where they can hang on to their tens of thousands of dollars.
All right, I'm Krugel. Thank you very much.
You bet.
The only Aurora police officer convicted in the death of Elijah McClain is appealing right before he's due to report to jail next month. A jury in Adams County found Randy Redeema guilty of criminally negligent homicide last year. He was one of 3 officers who stopped and restrained Elijah McClain after a 911 caller said that McClain looked sketchy. McClain wasn't breaking the law that night. He wasn't armed or anything. After he was put in a neck hold, McClain was injected with the sedative ketamine. His heart stopped, and he died 3 days later. Redeema's appeal lists a number of grounds, including the judge's decision to try him alongside another officer, Jason Rosenblatt. Redeema is scheduled to begin serving his 14-month jail sentence on March 22nd. The 2 paramedics who injected McClain with the sedative were both found guilty of criminally negligent homicide. They're set to be sentenced in the next 2 months. Another community is pushing back on misinformation about migrants. Colorado Springs says it's seen about 24 migrant families come to town, and most have since left. But the Colorado Republican Party says that the Springs is dealing with an influx of illegals. Today, Mayor Yemi Mobolade says he is concerned that political misinformation and panic is going to scare off the nonprofit partners who are helping the handful of migrants in the Springs.
And I'm trying to de-escalate our community from the notion that we do have a crisis. My fear is that if we keep the politics going, some of these partners will go dark. They will go underground. And they're the ones I'm actually depending on to communicate with me.
Mayor Mobolade says that The Springs is not centrally coordinating migrant support in the way that Denver is, so they're relying on communication from nonprofit partners like the Salvation Army to tell them how many migrants show up in the Springs. The Salvation Army says it has not seen any new migrants in the Springs since the original 21 families that came and then most left. But the mayor says the actual influx they're dealing with is misinformation and rumor, this idea that Denver's sending hundreds of migrants down to Colorado Springs hotels.
We've chased down every intel that has come our way. However, all this intel are proven to be false. The rumors are there because of fear that has been stirred up in our community. But please understand, I take it all seriously, and there is a cost to the taxpayers. We do not have the system or the resources to keep up with rumors.
If this misinformation playbook sounds familiar, it mirrors what we've reported on in Lakewood, where Republican leaders falsely claimed that Denver was sending thousands of migrants to live in Lakewood's empty school buildings. Despite having absolutely no proof, they still drew a crowd of hundreds of people to a meeting who were angry about what they thought was happening in Lakewood. The Colorado Republican Party is currently holding up Colorado Springs as a model of how cities and towns should reject migrants. And that's because last week, City Council in the Springs passed a largely ceremonial resolution saying the Springs would not spend money to help migrants. This week alone, leaders in Keensburg, Mesa County, and Monument have passed their own resolutions reiterating their quote-unquote non-sanctuary status, pledging not to use government resources for migrant services. Colorado's oil and gas industry would be forced to hit pause on their operations to improve our air quality under a bill proposed by Democrats today. Dems rolled out a bunch of air quality bills. One would raise fines for major polluters like Suncor's Commerce City refinery, and it would require pollution reduction at high traffic sites like huge office buildings. But the oil and gas industry is most upset about a proposal to, quote, pause drilling from May to October, starting in 2025. The fossil fuel industry says they're already trying to meet state mandates on emissions, and this new bill would essentially be a ban on local production. The environmental groups backing the proposal, like the Progressive Colorado Public Interest Research Group, COPERG, say that drastic action is needed to bring our summer air quality in line with federal standards.
We can produce this energy in this state while simultaneously lowering emissions. These policies ignore those realities and use a hammer approach to eliminate our industry.
There is a real cost to not going far enough in terms of acting to cut the pollution in our air that's harming our health and our quality of life.
Under the air pollution solution legislation, Democrats want CDOT to figure out how to get people to change their driving habits. Politics guy Marshall Zellinger hit a bit of a roadblock in trying to get specifics.
Nothing shouts pollution more than bumper-to-bumper traffic along Interstate 270 right next to Suncor in Commerce City. Under a bill to reduce greenhouse gases, CDOT will be required to give ideas to give drivers a reason to get off the road.
It really is about, making more options, making them more attractive, making them work better for people in their daily lives.
270 is still going to be reconstructed. It might get an additional toll lane, which does not necessarily encourage drivers to reduce their driving. CDOT has already studied ways to reduce pollution, like pushing for Front Range Rail and expanding its Bustang service, like along I-25 near Firestone, where a new Bustang stop just off the highway makes it easier to get on and off without having to lose too much travel time.
The more time that you can save at those boardings, the more that a bus trip really starts to compete pretty well with a car trip.
The bills to alter drivers' habits and reduce oil and gas site pollution is meant to better the air quality in this part of the Denver metro area and northern Colorado.
Vehicle miles traveled is contributing to the Front Range being out of compliance with EPA. It's affecting ozone, air quality, people's health.
Democratic State Senator Kevin Priola is one of the bill's main sponsors, who won't be around to see how it plays out.
You're telling CDOT, come to me with some stuff. What's something you'd like to see?
Well, I'm term limited, so they won't be coming to me. They'll be coming to legislators next year. Hopefully they'll come up with something very creative that helps address the issues we're dealing with along the Front Range with air quality and traffic.
This is another bill that Democrats can push forward regardless of Republican opposition, and probably not too much resistance even within their own party. This combines several Democratic hopes: reducing the footprint of oil and gas operations, improving transit options, and in a way, Kyle, getting involved in local land use issues to make all of it happen.
So all of this, like, there's a lot of kind of like nudges, like nudge behavior this way, nudge behavior that way. You know how this is going to work once it gets into like the outrage machine. The rage blender is going to spin it up as Democrats want to cap the number of miles you can drive, and then you can't drive any more miles. Is there a pathway to that in their bill?
CDOT, it would depend on CDOT. If CDOT came to them, which I don't think, with my conversation with Matt Inzio from CDOT, I don't think it's going to go there. I did have a conversation with State Senator Kim Frill about incentives and, like, do you have to incentivize people and give them money, like electric vehicles will give you a tax credit? Like, how much has to come out of the state? And his hope was that it would cost $0 state dollars to get people to change their behavior.
Well, maybe we could just run on hopes and dreams instead of fossil fuels, and that would fix everything. Marshall, thank you. Grand Junction wrestles with just how inhospitable to be to people who have nowhere to live in that city. Historic moment in space, lunar lander touches down on the moon. Now the real work begins for scientists at CU Boulder. And after vandals damaged the Martin Luther King Jr. statue in City Park, a former mayor takes the lead. Grand Junction's leaders just considered and rejected a ban on tents in local parks. Advocates there said that there are people living on the streets in Grand Junction who have nowhere else to go. Grand Junction already has an urban camping ban, similar to Denver's. It prohibits camping when shelter space is available. Grand Junction closed a park frequently used for camping last year and set up a resource center instead. Some on council and homeless advocates argued that that's not enough. They said the city needs to open more homelessness resources before they limit camping. The U.S. Forest Service is headed for approval on a plan that would add hundreds of acres to Monarch ski area after they looked at that plan's environmental impact. Investors want to expand Monarch's ski area into No Name Basin on the west side of the Continental Divide. The expansion of that ski area west of Salida would add more than 300 acres of new skiing and new lifts, and it would require a new access road. The project requires federal approval because it's there on national forest land. Today, the Forest Service gave it a preliminary okay. That becomes official after a 45-day objection period. A little piece of Colorado made it to the moon today. Scientists at CU Boulder will be using an instrument on board the Odysseus spacecraft to study and scope out the lunar environment. The Odysseus lander, which successfully touched down on the moon this afternoon, carries a radio telescope that CU Boulder scientists will use to study electrons hovering over the moon's surface. NASA wants to use that study to pave the way for human scientists to visit the moon by the end of the decade. CU is also using the telescope to try and pick up ancient wavelengths of light, which they say can help them study the history of the universe.
And if we can do that, it will tell us about the universe before there were stars. And in fact, it's sort of the final frontier of measuring the universe.
This spacecraft cannot operate during lunar night, so the scientists only have 8 to 14 days to complete their observations. Meteorologist Kathy Sabin's in now with a look ahead at the weather.
Kyle, it will be clear enough tonight for us all to admire the moon. And think about that story you just shared with us. How amazing is that? We have rain and snow showers moving out of the area with a fast-moving storm that brought at least a half a foot of snow to the high country. And a lot of people probably going to head up into the mountains tomorrow and get an early jump on the weekend, which looks fabulous. Temperatures today were cooler with that northerly wind. 42 degrees at DIA, 47 downtown. We'll jump a good 5 or 10 degrees tomorrow, and into the 60s we go for the weekend. So a string of mild days. Our system is tracking to the south, where it will produce thunderstorms that have hail in them. Outside of Memphis and Atlanta, Cincinnati, there'll be some airport delays across the eastern seaboard tomorrow. For us, the snow showers, the rain showers moving from the northwest to the southeast will be coming to an end here very shortly. Additional accumulation is light. There are no winter weather or travel advisories posted for the high country. So temperatures now close to 40 with clear skies. Will drop down to freezing after midnight. Your 7-day outlook, how about 53 degrees with sunshine on your Friday, mid-60s Saturday, close to 70 Sunday and Monday. Next system we're tracking will bring rain to snow Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. The low Wednesday morning, how about 9 degrees? So certainly some colder weather as we say goodbye to February next week.
You don't have enough money to keep taking it down. We're going to outraise you. We're going to outwork you.
A message from Denver's former mayor for the vandals who damaged the MLK statue in City Park. And in the war on pickleball, reports of a battle won for the pro pickleball forces. News tonight from the front in the war on pickleball. Roll that dramatic Fox News style graphic because we are headed to Fort Collins.
There is a huge and resounding call for pickleball. Loveland has a facility. Fort Collins can have a facility.
While Denver's cracking down on courts, Fort Collins is considering building a city-owned pickleball complex. This week, they gave the go-ahead for the city to conduct a feasibility study on potential sites. The study is financed by a local pickleball club whose members are giving the city $40,000 to find a site. If Fort Collins sets up its own pickleball complex, the city will become a bastion of pickleball safety. They've already signed a development agreement with a private pickleball facility with plans to open that site as early as this year. The MLK statue that was vandalized in Denver City Park is going to be fixed, but not by the city. That repair will be privately funded. Former Denver Mayor Wellington Webb and his wife, former state rep Wilma Webb, said today that they will lead a private fundraising effort to repair the memorial. It was dedicated in 2002 when Webb was serving as mayor. Yesterday, the Martin Luther King Jr. Colorado Holiday Commission confirmed that the memorial had been vandalized. A torch was taken, a plaque honoring African-American veterans was ripped off and stolen from the monument.
As you know, the mayor's going through some tragic budget cuts. Obviously, I'm sure he would prefer not to have to go through. And that's one of the areas where we're trying to adjust, is by raising enough private money that we can do this without having to ask the city for money.
The artist estimates that repairing the memorial could cost somewhere between $75,000 and $100,000. Former mayor said he would like to consider adding some more lights around the statue as well if they're going to do some work, and perhaps even put in some security cameras. We are back with your feedback, delivered by Marissa. Gracias. Next. The bosses will often tell us that we're on thin ice, but I just like to think of that as the most Colorado thing we saw today. A viewer named Cindy snapped this photo over the weekend. This is Rifle Gap State Park. That would appear to be a partially frozen lake because you got somebody in a boat and you got somebody ice fishing. That's a lot of confidence for the dude out there ice fishing, but I assume he knows what he's doing. If you see something that looks like Colorado to you, email it to us next at 9news.com. Eric writes in tonight about Evan Krugel's story about Denver's pot shops being fined if they don't have security. He said, how is it possible that dispensaries are required to lock up their product after hours and gun shops are not? Tracy from Denver writes in about Marshall Zellinger's reporting on air quality standards and how our driving impacts those. She says, Kyle, during the pandemic, the air quality was so much better. There's something to be said for working from home. There was that. Also got to have dinner with my kids. That was nice, too. We'll see you next time.